Adam Beck, who was mentioned by Satoshi Nakamoto in the Bitcoin white paper, has now massively raised his Bitcoin price target, and the reason will shock you. The slow adoption phase of Bitcoin is now going to shift into a sudden and exponential adoption phase because we have a lot of catalyst effects like ETFs, nation-state adoption, secret Bitcoin purchases, secret Bitcoin mining, foundation states, and much more. And now he assumes that the diminishing return theory will be broken upwards, and this will all happen in the next 3 to 4 years. At least Adam Beck is here, and he has now revised his Bitcoin price prediction up to a staggering $10 million. Let's look at Adam Beck's latest statements. Now, he's very bullish. He believes the Bitcoin S-curve could steepen as we've moved beyond gradual growth, with new users boosting adoption. Adam Beck is one of the OGs, one of the cyberpunks in the Bitcoin space, who actually stands for conservative communication. But now there seem to be reasons that have made him turn massively bullish, and we're going to take a look at this because it really has some serious impact. He says here that, in his personal opinion, the Bitcoin S-curve could experience more pronounced and steeper years now that we've moved past the phase of gradual growth, and suddenly new users are amplifying the adoption effects. This would invalidate the theory of diminishing returns through halvings and lead us to a peak in the S-curve, as Mr. Finney estimated back in January 2009 with $10 million per Bitcoin and an estimated addressable market of $200 trillion. So, Hal Finney had already laid out the game plan back then, showing that Bitcoin would rise to $10 million. In 2009, with $10 million per Bitcoin and an estimated addressable market of $200 trillion. This was already demonstrated. That means Hal Finney had already laid out the game plan back then, showing that Bitcoin would rise to $10 million. In 2001, Adam Beck, I'm not sure if he personally knew Hal Finney, but many assume that Hal Finney was Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm not so sure about this. Some also assume that Adam Beck is Satoshi Nakamoto. So, if you want to put it bluntly, you could say that Satoshi Nakamoto himself is predicting a $10 million Bitcoin price. But Edinburgh is not Satoshi Nakamoto. He's denied it multiple times, saying, no, I'm not Satoshi Nakamoto, and so on. So, I can definitely say that we can probably rule that out here. That he's not, but it's just really interesting because there's this theory of gradually, then suddenly. That's the theory, and there's also a book about it by Parker Lewis. He basically describes that you have this really slow adoption, like we've seen over the last few years. Comes in so linearly, with a few users joining in here and there, and eventually the network effects are such that it switches over, and suddenly we see an escalation scenario. And because we've passed a certain peak, some people also talk about the chasm or the gap that many, let's say, disruptive technologies have to break through. And then, for example, the internet initially struggled, then boomed. In other developments, it can be somewhat similar, and what Adam Beck is basically saying here is that he expects similar growth soon. This means acceleration with more companies, investors, and nations buying Bitcoin. He believes we're entering an S-curve, and this bull market could differ from past ones. No one can say if this is already happening right now, or if it's going to happen next year or the year after that, or what the final catalyst will be. This means that things are really speeding up with more companies, more institutional investors, and more nation-states buying Bitcoin. That's why he believes we're now fully drifting into this S-curve, and this bull run or this bull cycle, or just this bull market in general, could be completely different from all past bull markets because we're diving into this S-curve. No one can say if this is already happening right now, or if it's going to happen next year or the year after that, or what the final catalyst will be. Does fiat money need to break down even more, or does Donald Trump need to introduce a Bitcoin reserve? No one can say if this is already happening right now, or what the final catalyst will be. Does fiat money need to break down even more? No one can say for sure, but Adam Beck really estimates that we're heading towards $10 million. Do other countries like Russia and China need to secretly ramp up mining on a large scale? No one can say for sure, but Adam Beck really estimates that we're heading towards $10 million here. And it's also really important that he connects this to Hal Finney, who back in 2009 mentioned this as an amusing thought experiment. Imagine if Bitcoin becomes successful and turns into the dominant payment system worldwide. Then the total value of the currency should match the entire wealth of the world. Current estimates of global household wealth range from $100 trillion to $300 trillion. With 20 million coins, that puts the value of each coin at about $10 million. That was Hal Finney's prediction back then, but he was assuming that Bitcoin would establish itself as a global payment system. Adam Beck also clarified here and answered a viewer's question, saying, no, it doesn't need a payment system for that. The $10 million is basically the price he expects if Bitcoin establishes itself as a store of value. And that's also the adoption stage we're currently in. The original idea of Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system is still a bit far off. We haven't really reached that yet. Instead, we're more in the realm of being a store of value. And that's also the adoption stage we're currently in. Bitcoin's original idea as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system is still distant. We haven't achieved it yet. Currently, it's more a store of value. The payment system might come later, but even without it, Bitcoin's value storage could push its price to $10 million. Willy Woo corrected Adam Beck, saying his estimate was too low. If Hal Finney's prediction is correct, and considering the global household wealth was $100 to $300 trillion, Bitcoin's price could rise significantly. Willy Woo even corrected this and said, no, Adam Beck, you're way too low. The Bitcoin price, if Hal Finney's prediction comes true, and if you're already connecting to Hal Finney's prediction, then you need to do the math right, because back then, the global household wealth was estimated to be between $100 trillion and $300 trillion. By now, household wealth is at least double that. That also means that the Bitcoin price definitely shouldn't just go to $10 million, but rather should be heading towards $20 million. And we also have to keep in mind that Hal Finney calculated with 20 million coins. It's actually much more likely that we're talking about 18 million coins because so many Bitcoins have already been lost. Hal Finney probably did not take into account that Satoshi has already lost 1 million, or rather. But he probably did, which is why he's assuming 20 million, but he didn't factor in that many other people have lost their Bitcoins in the meantime. Maybe he didn't expect people to be so careless with their Bitcoins at the beginning and to handle their security so recklessly. In the early days, it's likely that around 2 to 3 million Bitcoins were lost in just the first 3 to 5 years. And over time, more and more Bitcoins will also be lost. So you could actually be looking at a number closer to 17 or 18 million, probably more like 16 or 17 million. And then the Bitcoin price is even higher here. Then we are not only at 20, but then we are really at over 20 million. But I'd say don't get too bullish either, because others have noted this as a top signal. If even conservative folks become ultra bullish, caution is needed. Adam Beck did say Bitcoin would hit a certain price by November or the halving. He miscalculated by about 5 months but recognized the trend correctly. Bitcoin rose. He was only off by months. Remember when he suggests Bitcoin's exponential growth in 2 to 3 years. It doesn't mean it will happen then. It could take longer. The trend is interesting, timing uncertain, potential realistic. This could overshadow Saylor's diminishing returns model, 50% CAGR flattening to 15 to 20% by 2045. Early investors gain more. Beck argues returns could break upwards soon. This is the stock to FOMO model. Exponential growth leads to a FOMO cycle before flattening, remembering the S-curve. He says Bitcoin could enter an exponential growth phase in the next 2 to 3 years. However, it might take 5 or 6 years. The trend is interesting, but no one knows if it will happen soon. The potential is realistic and could overshadow price levels predicted by Michael Saylor, who assumes diminishing returns with a 50% CAGR flattening by 2045 to around 15 to 20%. Early investors gain more, while later ones see less. Adam Beck argues against Saylor, suggesting diminishing returns could break upwards soon. This is called the stock to FOMO model, where exponential growth occurs due to strong network effects and catalysts, leading to a FOMO cycle of growth for several years before flattening. The S-curve will eventually flatten, though the timing is uncertain. If we have an average of 50% per year, a CAGR of 50%, then it's going to start flattening out, and by 2045 we might be down to around 15% or something like that, or was it 20%? That means we have decreasing returns every year, so those who got in early made the most returns, and those who come in later will make less and less. And now Adam Beck stands up and says, no, Michael Saylor, you're definitely wrong. Because while we still have diminishing returns, those diminishing returns could break out upwards in the next 2 to 3 years. Some people call this the stock to FOMO model, where all the models we have really break out upwards because we're seeing exponential growth as the network effects become so strong. Suddenly, due to catalyst effects, so many people flood into Bitcoin, and then we could see the ultimate FOMO cycle leading to maybe 3, 4, or 5 years of exponential growth until it eventually flattens out again. Because we need to remember that the S-curve goes steeply upwards. I don't know if that's going to take 1, 2, or 3 years, but then it will eventually flatten out again. This means we have a slow start using exponential growth and a slow flattening out. And that's basically the growth or birth phase of a whole bunch of disruptive technologies. So at first people laugh at it, then they fight against it, they ignore it, and then Bitcoin wins. And that's basically the scenario that Adam Beck is laying out here. I'm not 100% sure right now because Adam Beck hasn't responded to this, but it could actually be related to Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor made the announcement or the call for the US to buy a massive amount of Bitcoin. The US is supposed to buy up to 25% of the Bitcoin supply to create a speculative hedge against the BRICS currencies. Michael Saylor even called for the US to sell their gold and use that to buy Bitcoin. I made a video about that earlier, and there were some really crazy comments where people were saying that Michael Saylor has completely lost it. He's totally going off the deep end. And I have to agree with this to some extent because Michael Saylor is actually provoking a war here. I didn't mention this in detail before, but Michael Saylor's actions are quite bold. He's provoking a currency war, which isn't ideal. Bitcoin is meant to be peaceful. Yet Saylor voices what many secretly think. From another angle, he's just presenting facts clearly, reflecting hidden thoughts. And from that point of view, you can say that it is not reprehensible, because in the end he is simply laying the facts on the table. He just makes it so clear, like a lot of people might be thinking in the background. And now Max Keiser has also jumped in and says, I'm raising my price target for Bitcoin to $2.2 million. Michael Saylor's speculative attack on the global gold market worth $20 trillion has a very high chance of success. MicroStrategy uses the global bond market worth $200 trillion, so you always have to convert it into German, it's actually $200 billion, to pull the rug out from under gold. He says rug pull is happening right now, and if we really see a rug pull like Max Keiser or Adam Beck are suggesting, it means that anyone who doesn't have Bitcoin is going to get massively rug pulled, basically getting taken for a ride. You have to say that Max Keiser always exaggerates. With him, you should take off about 20 to 30%. But with Adam Beck, you can't just assume he's some loudmouth or anything like that, because Adam Beck has always provided very well-founded analyses. He also works very closely with Blockstream on Bitcoin innovation, Bitcoin technology, and so on. And like I said, he laid the groundwork for Bitcoin. Without Adam Beck, there might not be any Bitcoin at all. He is in the white paper. Adam Beck is a super serious person, massively recognized in the entire Bitcoin space. Nobody will say a bad word about Adam Beck, or maybe someone will, but most of them have no criticism or anything like that to say about Adam Beck and are very, very happy for the work that you are doing here on the Bitcoin network. And now a person like that is putting out such a bullish price prediction. If you don't have any Bitcoin yet, here's a big recommendation. Check out 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Download the app, register. Buy Bitcoin super easy, safe, and simple. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I'll give you a link below, and please leave me a like here. It doesn't cost you anything, it's free, and it supports my work immensely, because Bitcoin is really winning here now, and now Bitcoin really needs to get into proportion and people need to understand it. So definitely share the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. That helps me, it helps Bitcoin, and this way we can win even faster with Bitcoin. Until then, peace out.